from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the following is provided by the West Virginia Department of Education and West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Hey everyone, it's Education Station, the show where we invite teachers from all across West Virginia to submit videos of themselves teaching their favorite lessons. In today's episode, we've got one science lesson and two fun read-alouds. Well, hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Alex Milanese, and we're kicking off today's episode with an exciting science lesson. Ms. Sinisi is going to describe some of the different properties of water. Let's check it out.
Today we're going to look at properties of water. It's a little bit longer than our other videos, but there are a lot of properties of water. So 70% of Earth is ocean water, and about 65% of your body is made up of water. So why is water so important? What about water makes it an important aspect of our life? We're going to look at the unusual and unique properties of water. I don't know if you'll find them unusual or not, but they are unique. The first one is polarity, right? You've heard of a pole or polar. We have a North Pole and a South Pole right on the globe. So here we're having charge in two different areas. Water is H2O, right? So we have two hydrogen molecules and one oxygen. And what happens here is oxygen is carrying more of the negative electrons this way, and hydrogen, since only one electron, one proton, right? One neutron, 1, 1, 1, is pulling the hydrogen this way. So we have a pole. We have a negative side and a positive side to water. And that makes it a unique molecule simply because the fact that it's polar gives it the ability to do different things, right? Here we have each of our hydrogen atoms, and they are covalently bonded to oxygen. There are two types of bonds, covalent bonds and ionic bonds. In covalent bonds, we're going to share our electrons. So we're kind of sharing them with oxygen, which is why the negative charge is pulling that way, because our proton is pulling this way, right? These two positive charge. So oxygen has these two unshared pairs of electrons, and it's electronegative because it's not completed its outer energy level. And if you're interested in that, we could do a video on orbitals and, valence electrons, if you like. Water is polar. It has an uneven distribution of electron density, partial negative charge near oxygen and partial positive charge near hydrogen. This results in the formation of what are called hydrogen bonds. And hydrogen bonds are very, very important when we're dealing with the body especially. Your DNA, which we've done a video on before, the base pairs are held together with hydrogen bonds. There is a lot of energy stored in hydrogen bonds, which we're going to look at in a minute. What are the unique properties that are due specifically to the hydrogen bonds? When you put ice in water, it floats, right? It floats because the hydrogen bonds that hold the water molecules hold them further apart, right? So we've got a bunch of water molecules hooked together, but those hydrogen bonds are holding them apart. So the solid, they're farther apart in that solid than they are in a liquid, and that causes the ice to float. We have what's called a hydrophobic effect. Hydro means water. You've heard of a hydroelectric plant. Phobic means fear of, right? So our hydrophobic effect is the exclusion of compounds that contain carbon or hydrogen or non-polar compounds. So we have they repel each other, right? Polar compounds and non-polar compounds. If you had a glass of water here and you poured vegetable oil on top of it, and it kind of starts to go and then it pushes it all to the top, that's because oils and fats are non-polar molecules, and the polarity of water pushes them apart. This is very important in your cell membranes in your body. This is called, the cell membranes called the phospholipid or the lipid, which means fat, bilayer. So we have two sets of fatty acids that are joined by these little heads. And these heads are called hydrophilic because they love the water, so they face the water. Their tails face the middle, and they're called hydrophobic. They fear the water, so they're pushed away from it. That's where we get the polarity differences between nonpolar and polar and how they interact. Those fats, lipids, oils, those are the nonpolar ones, and the water is going to repel those due to the strong hydrogen bonds that hold the water molecules together. Have you ever heard the expression oil and water don't mix? That's where it came from. Boiling point and freezing point. Water has a small molecular weight, which means that when we add up the oxygen and the hydrogen, we don't get a large number, but it's an incredibly large boiling point. The boiling point of water is 100 degrees Celsius, right? And so this occurs because the water requires more energy to break those hydrogen bonds before it can boil. We've got water sitting here, we heat it, right? The water molecules start to move. And as they move around, they gain energy. But we can't get it to boil until we start to break it apart. And that's when it starts to, you see it bubble, so you know it's boiling, right? It takes a lot of energy to break hydrogen bonds. The same thing occurs when we freeze water. The two factors that we just looked at are important to organisms and water ecosystems. Freezing point and boiling point. We want to have a high boiling point of water right in this low freezing point because you have those organisms that live in the water, and those drastic changes could disturb their environment. That could cause them to die. So we need to have this large amount, right, of degree of separation so that those organisms can live. Density is another factor. It's the ratio of mass to volume. And I kind of wrote out the equation here for you. This P means density. I don't know why it's a P. And it's mass over volume, right? We're dividing mass by volume. That's the ratio of those two things. Mass, right? We looked at mass, how much space something takes up, and then volume we'll look at that as a function of mass. Dense objects feel heavier, right? And they tend to sink, while less dense objects feel lighter and they tend to float. So if something's very heavy, very dense, we put it in water and it sinks to the bottom, right? Or if it's not, it'll float. The density of most objects change as temperature changes because we have all the molecules packed close together, and as they warm up, they get kinetic energy. They start to move, right? So warmer temperatures make substances less dense due to the random kinetic energy, the movement of the molecules. They're moving apart. They don't want to be together anymore because it's warm. If they're cold, they're all huddled together. As we warm them up, they separate, right? The density of water is a very special case, and I've drawn some little pictures here for you. In the summer and then the fall before turnover, and we'll look at what turnover is, and the fall after. So the water is most dense at 39 degrees Fahrenheit. As it cools or warms from that set point, it expands slightly, right? So this means that the ice is slightly less dense than cold water. So what happens? That's why it floats on the surface of bodies of water. So when the lake freezes in the winter, why is the ice not on the bottom? It's less dense, so it floats to the top. Right? The floating ice slows the freezing process. So it's kind of insulating that water underneath of it so that that layer of ice is keeping that water that's below it from freezing all the way through, right? So the layer of ice, it prevents many lakes from freezing solid. That way the fish and the other organisms can survive. If all the water underneath froze, then the fish would survive, or the fish wouldn't survive. Turnover occurs when the water on the surface of the lake cools in the fall, and then it will eventually become more dense than the water beneath, so the cold water will sink to the bottom and the warm water will rise in this instance. So that's the turnover of the lakes. This just helps keep organisms be able to survive. Another factor is surface tension. Besides mercury, water has the highest surface tension of all liquids. You probably don't remember, but if you're older and watching this video, they used to put mercury in thermometers, right? It would tell us you'd put it on the bottom in the little bulb and then the mercury would rise or go up and down. They don't do that anymore because mercury is carcinogenic. They use alcohol. Usually ethyl alcohol. Surface tension is the property of the surface of a liquid that allows it to resist an external force due to the cohesive nature of its molecules. Again, the cohesive nature comes from the hydrogen bonds that hold the water together. So we've got those hydrogen bonds that are between the water molecules, and they're constantly pulling the molecules in many different directions, right? All over the place because it's moving, it's not static. So you've got that water, that bond, those hydrogen bonds. And then the surface of the molecules, those ones that are at the top are only going to be pulled right side to side and down. They're not pulled up, there's nothing on top of them. You're at the very top of the water, we can only pull down or side to side. We can't pull up, there's nothing here to pull up, right? So now we get
Thanks, Miss Sinisi. All right, next up, Mrs. Milanese is going to read us a story about a little girl named Libby and a chicken named Delia. Let's check it out.
Hello everyone, my name is Alicia Milanese, and today I'm going to be reading you a story. I found this story on an app called Epic. Epic is a free app that you can download onto a phone, tablet, or iPad, and there are tons of stories to choose from. I chose a really cool one for us today, so let's check it out. Today's story is called Libby Wembley, Mother Hen. The author is Amy Cobb, and the illustrator is Alexandria Neonicus. Libby Wembley, Mother Hen. Chapter 1. Where's Delia? One spring morning, Libby Wembley slipped into her rain jacket. She tugged on her rain boots, too. Then Libby skipped all the way to the barn. "Hi, Libby," Dad said. "Would you please gather the eggs?" "Sure." Libby reached for a basket. "Thanks," Dad said. So Libby headed over to the nesting boxes. "Good morning, hens," she called. "Cluck, cluck," said the hens. Libby reached into the first nesting box. The white hen with the floppy comb fluttered away. Libby pulled an egg and carefully placed it inside her basket. A black and white hen had laid an egg in the second nesting box. Libby admired the brown speckles before gently putting it into her basket too. Libby got to the third nesting box. That's where a red and white hen named Delia usually laid her eggs. Today, the nest was empty. Where could Delia be? Chapter 2. Chicken Checkup. "Delia, where are you?" Libby called. She looked for Delia everywhere. Delia wasn't in the doghouse or by the tractor. Delia wasn't in the hayloft either. Then Libby spotted something. Red feathers peeked out of her bicycle basket. "Delia!" Libby cried. "What are you doing in there?" "Walk," Delia squawked. She flapped her wings, and she refused to come out. Someone's feathers are all in a ruffle," Libby joked. Maybe Delia would come out for a treat. Libby pulled a slice of bread from her pocket. "Come on, Delia, it's your favorite," Libby coaxed. Delia turned up her beak. She didn't want a treat, and she still didn't budge. "What's wrong, Delia?" Libby asked. "Are you sick?" Libby took a closer look at the hen. Delia's eyes were bright. Her comb was full and red, and Delia didn't have a fluffy feather out of place. But still, Delia wasn't acting quite like herself today. Libby decided she'd better let Dad know. She ran to tell him. "Dad," Libby called, "something's wrong with Delia." Dad followed Libby. "Walk." Delia squawked at Dad too. "See?" Libby said. Maybe Delia wants to go for a bike ride." But then Libby noticed something. "Wait, Delia has made a nest in my basket. Look at all those eggs," Libby cried. Chapter 3. Delia and Doodle. Said Dad. "Now that you mention it, I haven't gathered any eggs from Delia lately." Just then Doodle the rooster flew up and landed on the gate. "Cock-a-doodle-doo," he crowed. "It's too late for crowing, Doodle," Libby frowned. "That silly rooster still doesn't know how to tell time." Dad laughed. Maybe Doodle's chicks will be better at telling time than he is. "Chicks?" Libby asked. She was confused at first. But then Libby knew exactly what Dad meant, so that's why Delia made a nest in my bicycle basket. Delia and Doodle are going to be parents. Libby jumped up and down. "That's right, Libby," Dad smiled. Soon there would be little chicks hopping about on the farm. There was so much to get ready for them, but for now, Libby had to take extra special care of Delia. Chapter 4. Can't wait. Libby knew Delia had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. That meant Delia couldn't leave her nest. At least, not for very long. So Libby made sure Delia had some fresh water nearby, and she put more grain near Delia's nest too. Then Libby waited and waited. After a few days, nothing had happened. "How much longer until the chicks hatch, Dad?" Libby asked. Dad said, "It takes about 3 weeks for an egg to hatch." Libby did the math in her head. 7 days a week times 3 weeks. Oh, that's 21 days. I can't wait that long. "Those chicks will hatch before you know it," Dad said, smiling. "Just keep an eye on Delia's nest." Libby nodded. "I will." Libby checked on Delia every day and sometimes twice. Finally, it was time for the eggs to hatch. At bedtime, Libby said, "Can we check on Delia one more time, please?" Mom smiled. "Again?" But she and Dad agreed that Libby could. So Mom, Dad, Libby, and her little brother Stuart all headed to the barn. Chapter 5. Extra Special Delivery. When they got there, Delia was sitting on her nest, same as usual. "Looks like the chicks still haven't hatched," Mom said. Libby was disappointed. Dad patted Libby's shoulder. "It's okay, Libby. It shouldn't be much longer now." The next morning, Libby ran to the barn first thing. She looked inside her bicycle basket. Still nothing, Libby sighed. But then Libby heard something. Very softly there was one little peep, and then another peep, peep, peep. Libby ran to get Mom, Dad, and Stuart. "The eggs are hatching!" Libby cried when everyone had gathered around. Crack, peep, peep. "But how do the chicks get out of that hard shell?" Stuart wondered. "I know," Libby said. "They have a tiny egg tooth. And in a few days, the chicks will lose their egg tooth because they don't need it anymore. Right, Dad?" Dad nodded. "You're right." Pretty soon, the sounds of lots of little peeps filled the barn. A few chicks even peeked out from beneath Delia's wings. "Aw, they're the cutest chicks ever," Libby said. "Cock-a-doodle-doo," Doodle crowed from the gate. "Doodle," Libby smiled. "Congratulations, you're a dad!" "Congratulations to you too, Libby," Mom said. "Me?" Libby looked confused. "Why?" "Because you've taken such good care of Delia and her chicks, you're officially a mother hen," Mom said. "Cluck, cluck, cluck," Libby joked, and everyone laughed. There are so many other stories just like this one in the Libby Wembley series. You can find them on the Epic app.
Thanks, Mrs. Milanese. Now, for our final segment today, we have another read aloud, and this time it's from Miss Morse. She's got an old folktale that I think you're going to like. Let's check it out.
Hello again, I'm Miss Jody of Literacy Volunteers, and I have another story for you. And this is a Punjabi folktale. It's told by Flora Annie Steele. And it's about a jackal, which is a kind of a wild dog, and a partridge, which is a bird. I don't have a jackal or a partridge, so what I have is Willie Coyote and my cardinal. So he's going to be the jackal, and he's going to be the partridge. But just realize that's the story. So a jackal, I'm going to use the coyote, and a partridge, we're going to have this bird, swore eternal friendship. That means they were going to be friends forever. But the jackal was very exciting and very, very jealous. "You don't do half as much for me as I do for you," said this critter. He used to say, "and you talk a great deal about your friendship." Now, my idea of a friend is one who can make me laugh or cry, give me a good meal, and save my life if I have to. You couldn't do that. Let's see, said the bird. Follow me a little distance, and if I don't make you laugh, you may eat me. Okay. So the little bird flew on till she met two travelers walking along, one behind the other. They were both footsore, which means they'd been walking a lot and their feet hurt. And they were tired. And the first carried a bundle on a stick over his shoulder, while the second had his shoes in his hand because his feet hurt. Light as a feather, the bird settled on the first traveler's stick. He, none the wiser, trudged on. So the traveler went on, didn't even know he had the bird on his stick. The second traveler, seeing the bird sitting so tamely in front of his nose, said to himself, "There's a chance for supper." He thought he was going to eat that bird who was on the stick of the man behind him, in front of him, and immediately flung his shoes at it, and they were ready at hand, because remember, he was carrying the shoes. Whereupon the bird flew away, and the shoes knocked off the first traveler's hat. "What a plague do you mean?" he said, angrily turning on his companion. "Why'd you throw your shoes at my head?" "Brother," replied the other, "do not be vexed, don't be cranky. I didn't throw them at you, but at the bird that was sitting on your stick." "On my stick? Do you take me for a fool? Don't tell me such a silly story. First you insult me, then you lie like a coward, but I'll teach you manners." They didn't even know that the bird had been there. Then he fell upon his fellow traveler without much more, and they fought until they could not see out of their eyes, till their noses were bleeding and their clothes were rags, and the jackal had nearly died of laughing. Now, when this jackal, we're now using the coyote, but he saw this whole silly commotion. He thought it was the funniest thing he ever saw, and he fell down rolling around the ground laughing. "Are you satisfied?" said the bird to her friend. Actually, his friend, because that's a red cardinal. "Well," answered the jackal, "you certainly made me laugh, but I doubt you could make me cry. It's easy enough to be a buffoon, but it's more difficult to excite the higher emotions." "Let's see," replied the bird, somewhat angry, piqued, but he was a little bit ticked off. "There's a huntsman with his dogs coming along the road. Just creep into that hollowed tree and watch me. If you don't weep scalding tears, you must have no feeling in you." And the wolf did as he was told, and he watched the partridge, who had begun fluttering around the bushes till the dogs caught sight of her. When he flew into the hollow tree where the jackal was hiding, of course the dogs smelled him at once, and they set up such a yelping and a scratching that the husband came up, seeing what it was, dragged this poor critter out by the tail, whereupon the dogs worried him in their hearts, and they finally left him for dead. They banged around with those other dogs. Well, needless to say, by and by he opened his eyes, he was only foxing, and saw the partridge sitting, the bird, sitting on a branch. "Did you cry?" he asked anxiously. "Did I arouse your higher emotion? Be quiet, will you?" snarled "I'm half dead with fear." So there the wolf, or actually it's the coyote, lay for some time getting the better of his bruises, because those other dogs had really banged around on him. Meanwhile, he became very hungry. "Now is the time for friendship," he said to the bird. "Get me a good dinner, and I will acknowledge you're a true friend." "Very well," replied the bird, "only watch me and help yourself when time comes." Just then, a group of women came by, carrying their husband's dinner from the field. They had all their baskets of food they were taking to their farmer friends in the field. The bird gave a little plaintive cry, "Ooh, cheep, cheep, cheep," and began fluttering along the bush as if he were wounded. A wounded bird," cried the women. "We can easily catch it." Whereupon they set to chase this bird who was fluttering around in the bushes. But the cunning, smart little bird played 1,000 tricks till they became so excited over their chase that they put down their bundles on order to try to catch the bird. The jackal, meanwhile, seizing his opportunity, crept up and made off with a good dinner, because they were all in the baskets. "Well," returned our coyote. "I confess you have given me a very good dinner. You have also made me laugh and cry," he said. "But after all, the greatest test of friendship is beyond you. You couldn't save my life." "Perhaps not," said the bird mournfully. "I am so small and weak. But it grows late. We should be going home, and as it's a very long way around by the bridge, let's just go across the river. My friends the crocodiles will carry us across." Now the river was filled with crocodiles. Now you know that a crocodile is not going to sit idly by when there was a nice little dinner of this coyote. Accordingly, they set off for the river, and the crocodile kindly consented to carry them across. So they sat on his broad back and ferried them across the river. But just as they were in the middle of the stream, the middle of the river, the bird remarked, "I believe the crocodile intends to play us a trick." See, the crocodile let them get on. They got to the middle of the river, and then the crocodile said, "Now we're going to catch this critter." And he says, he said, "How awkward if he were to drop you in the river." "Awkward for you, too," replied our coyote, sort of turning pale, because the bird could fly if he got dumped, but our critter was not going to be able to fly, and he would fall into the river, and the crocodiles might eat him. "Not at all. I have wings, and you haven't, ha." At this, our critter shivered and shook with fear. When the crocodile, in the gruesome growl, remarked that he was hungry and wanted a good meal, he watched the critter without saying a word. "Pooh," said the bird airily. "Don't play tricks on us. I should fly away. As for my bird, the critter, you couldn't hurt him. He's not such a fool as to take his life with him on these little trips and leaves it at home, locked up in a cupboard." "Is that a fact?" said the crocodile. "Certainly," said the bird. "Try to eat him if you like, but you will only tire yourself in the purpose." "Dear me, how very odd," gasped the crocodile. And he was so taken back that he carried the critter safely to the shore. "Well, are you satisfied now?" asked the bird. "My dear sir," quoth our critter, "you have made me laugh, you have made me cry, you have given me a good dinner, and now you've saved my life. But upon my honor, I think you two are clever for a friend. So goodbye." And the critter never again went near that bird, because this bird had tricked him, but he's also made him laugh and cry, but he did save his life. So how about that? Some strange animals can be friends even though they aren't sure. So here we have our critter and our bird, and they actually became friends, didn't they? And I think we should all realize that we can become friends to somebody who even they're a little bit different, because we all have gifts.
Thanks, Miss Morse. All right, well, that wraps up everything for us here today on Education Station. We want to thank everyone who shared their awesome lessons, and we want to thank you for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Education Station.